Yeah, that's it. Any logistical questions before we jump into the what did we say? It's the ecosystem. It's the wide, wonderful, weird world of JavaScript beyond what we've covered so far. It's about to get exciting, so we're very excited to teach it all. Any other questions before we get started? It's going to be a great lecture today. I'm extremely excited. Okay. Okay, we're going to hand it off to Vaughn. He's going to kick us off. Okay.
All right, so as I mentioned, following off Ethan, this is probably one of the, what makes software engineering. One of the reasons that it's so, such a cool concept to learn is because there's just so much out there. And we're going to talk about what that means and, give some examples today. But what's really important about this lecture, or, this is still kind of quote-unquote academic. We have to explain some really important concepts because while we've been working in JavaScript, we've been working with React, we haven't really talked about too much about where we're writing it, who's running this JavaScript. We've kind of abstracted this away. And what I mean by that is that so far all of our projects and labs have been mostly code sandboxes, right? We hand you a link to a code sandbox that has a file that you can edit that looks like a React component. You can edit it. It'll change how the view looks, right? But we haven't really talked about what all those other files are, right? At the top of the screen we say import React. Well, how did React get there? Right? We're going to explore this a little bit more today. And the really important thing that's going to come away from today, and we'll release a guide on it later, is how do I start my own React project by myself, from scratch? Right? Presumably, you're not going to be working with code sandboxes your entire life. Hopefully not. But we're going to be talking today about the whole, some of the fundamental pillars that you need to understand so that you can start to hook into the ecosystem instead of using stuff like code sandbox. Yeah, cool. So let me make sure. Here we are. All right, so we have to introduce a small distinction here of client-side JavaScript and then something called node.js. So I guess all the JavaScript that we've talked about so far, or usually when we say that, when we describe what a website is, you might often hear it described as a bundle of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? And so JavaScript, a language like any other, it's just like Python, but the program that's running it, JavaScript, it used to be that it always ran in the browser, right? So JavaScript was a language. It was made exclusively for the web. The whole idea was that it would describe how web pages change and stuff, and there was no compiler or interpreter for JavaScript outside of the browser. It was the browser's job to receive a JavaScript file, compile it, and run the code, right? And then as JavaScript grew in popularity, right, there's a big history to JavaScript. Node.js became a thing. And Node.js is basically an engine to run JavaScript outside of the browser. And that seems kind of trivial, but in the same way that in 61A we learned about Python and how do we run a Python file, we call Python hello.py, right? That wasn't a thing you could do with JavaScript. Only the browser would do would be able to run JavaScript. We've always talked about how if you want to test something out, you open up the console, right? This was our kind of Python interface, right? But Node.js is the way that we can run JavaScript outside of the browser. You don't need to really know too much about Node, thankfully. However, it's important to know the context. That Node is is kind of separate from the way that JavaScript is usually run, and that it's run on a computer in some sense. The browser's not the one compiling it. Your computer has a special program just to compile it. Yeah, it's a little bit strange. It's okay if you can't quite get your head around this, but the context is necessary, and that's because I guess we've always talked about when we talk about external libraries, right? The way that external libraries typically work is that we talked about those script tags, right? That when you want to install React in your project, in your HTML file, you have a script tag that has a link to React's JavaScript file, right? All of React is in one huge JavaScript file, right? And you just add that link to your project, and your your HTML will make sure to include all that JavaScript for you, right? But that's kind of that's a little bit icky to work with sometimes, and there's those script tags can get a little bit unmanageable when there's a lot of them in your project. So that's where NPM kind of comes in. So what is NPM? NPM is a huge package hosting service as well as a tool that helps you manage JavaScript project packages inside your project. It is the largest package manager in the world. There's a really cool image. It's going to load. I'll open up a new tab. But NPM has over almost 1 million packages on it. All packages are public. They're the GitHub code is all out there, and it's just an incredible when we talk about like community for the web, like NPM is basically the epitome of it. So what you're looking at is basically, these are all package managers for different languages, like for PHP, for Python, for Ruby, and you can see like the numbers of packages over time. And this is the red line for JavaScript. And it's, wait, is this over the span of, I think, 1 year? Huh? Oh, all time. So this is the last year. It jumped over for 100,000 in just, or sorry, 200,000 in just a year. But all time, let's see. Yeah. So NPM is like the biggest package manager out there. Holy crap. And there's almost 1 million different NPM modules. So that's why I guess that's some context there. So it's going to be kind of hard. Like, we're going to talk about this, like, just the command-wise of what you would run. But Ethan will give a demo at the end of like exactly seeing all of this. The reason we're not diving into this is because, so NPM is a package manager, not for regular, like, it's a package manager for Node. So the moment that Node came out, like the moment that JavaScript as a language came out of the browser and could be run anywhere, it didn't just have to be used for web pages. It could be used for any type of program that anyone wants to write. For example, like, you might have like be familiar with the idea that, oh, data analytics or like, data science is typically done with Python, right? While JavaScript is typically done with web stuff. The moment that Node.js like became a thing, you can now use JavaScript for literally anything. You could use it for creating web servers. You could use it for creating like, I can't even like begin to describe, but any program that you want to write could be written in JavaScript. And so NPM is general for all of Node. NPM is not just a React thing, right? But you can use it for in our React projects. So these commands are commands that you would run in your command line. So you wouldn't run this in like the console, like the JavaScript console. You'd have to open up I'm not actually going to run it. You'd have to run them in here. Like, that's what we're talking about. You have to run them in your terminal. NPM init creates a new JavaScript project. It's very, very bare bones. It creates one file in a folder. It's called package.json, which we'll look into in just a second. NPM install, and then the name of a dependency will add like, it'll just install whatever the name of the package that you asked for into your project. So it's that simple. It's one line of code, adds a package to your project, and then NPM install without any dependencies will download and install all the dependencies of your project. That's a little confusing, but I'll show you an example. But yeah, so you had a question?
I'm a bit confused because this seems like you would do server-side program execution, and I was thinking that the whole React thing is only front end. And yeah, the only explanation, and also with this NPM thing, at the end, if I use NPM packages, they are backend, or?
Are they backend?
This is backend.
That's a good question. So the question was,
not, yeah, the only alternative would be that kind of Firefox has access to this NPM pool and would call the responding packages.
Yeah. So I think if I understand your question, and it's a really great question, is that if I mention that these packages are for our JavaScript projects in like the web, in the browser, right? Then how come we're installing these packages like not in the browser, right? Like the reason that we had script tags in our HTML was because when we send our HTML file and our JavaScript files to like whoever the user that's requesting it, like they need to know what JavaScript packages the user needs to download, if that makes sense. Like, remember that the way that websites work, right, is if we have like 10 different JavaScript libraries in our project, every single person who needs to access our website needs to download those libraries for the page to load and work, right? And so the kind of question is like, we're running this code on our computer. How does this kind of translate? Or the question as we're going to address it is really, how does this all translate to going from our computer to the client side? And the answer is like, whenever you work with React, right? React is only the front end part of the web. We're only talking about the HTML, the JavaScript, and the CSS. There is more to like building a full stack website, and that is like the backend aspect of it. We're going to show you like at the end of the lecture like a way where basically you don't have to worry about the backend side. It's all abstracted away. So that's what Ethan's going to talk about later.
But so if
these packages, when you install them, will get bundled into your front-end code. Yeah. So this is a little bit confusing, but yeah.
Or you send the raw data from the packages as a one-liner, let's say, as a, yeah.
Yeah. This
Or
is the
you
second
do
half
the
of the
link,
lecture.
or- okay.
Yeah. There's a lot to this.
But so this
But yeah.
this passes a library in the, let's say, head component with your website.
Sort of. It's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, good question. So, did everyone catch that? Basically, what the point of this is that this isn't, at the end of the day, this will not, like when we're working with our React project, this won't work any differently than like those script tags did. You're going to run npm install, you'll run npm install and then the name of your dependency, and it will, like, and that dependency will eventually get sent like along with the rest of your JavaScript. You can trust that when you're working with something we call create React app. Other question?
Just to clarify, everything that we touch with npm will be executed in the front end.
No, that's not a general statement. So as I mentioned, npm is for
I need
Node.
this interaction with the packages. So if we say, okay, I need a package and I use it, I use this package, will it happen front end?
Not
When we try to
necessarily.
talk to
It's, I want to hold your question to the end of the lecture because like it's kind of hard to get a scope for all of this until you hear the full picture. But I will say that npm is not specific to React, not specific to front end. It is just a general package manager for JavaScript projects of any kind. However, we will use it in terms of React, and there are things like other packages we'll use that make sure that every package we install using npm gets sent to the front end. Yeah. Anyway, other questions on this weird what is npm? This is a little bit confusing to understand. I know that it's hard for me to explain as well, but it'll be much easier to kind of see as we go on in the lecture with demos and stuff. So anyway, these commands will become very familiar to you. npm init, again, creates a brand new JavaScript project. And what that means is it creates one file called package.json, which we'll go over in the next slide. These other two commands are very important. npm install, the name of your dependency, will install that dependency in your project, which we'll talk about what that means. And then another very useful command is npm install. And this installs all the dependencies of your project at once. So what does it mean to install a dependency? That's kind of weird. But let's look at what package.json is. So you will find this file in every single JavaScript project that you work with. Right? So actually in Code Sandbox, you could find this file as well. So you can go back and look. But what we're seeing here is basically, it's a JSON file, and it's just a description of our project. So we see some common things like name, version, description, main. These are all optional, but npm creates them for you. The really important ones are dependencies and scripts. So there's this dependencies kind of dictionary or object in your package.json file, and this describes what libraries or what external libraries does your project need to work. Right? So in this case, we have three. The keys of this dictionary are like the names of the packages, while the values are what version you're asking for. Right? So we have React version 16.8.6, React DOM version 16.8.6, and then something called React Scripts version 2.1.8. So as you add packages to your projects, this list will get longer and longer and longer. But package.json again describes your project. So this is what we're saying. What dependencies do we need? And the reason this is important, which we'll again get into later, is that usually these dependencies are they might take up kilobytes or megabytes of data, right? If I want to give someone else my project, it would be it ends up becoming pretty cumbersome to give them the entire all the dependencies. So this file kind of helps describe what do you need in your project, and then anyone who wants to work with your project can install the dependencies on their own, because this file kind of gives a description for what needs to be installed. Yeah. And then the second part of the package.json file is this scripts tag. So the scripts dictionary, which is less important, but it defines some kind of aliases or shortcuts you can use to run longer commands. So this doesn't mean much, but we wanted to say it because it's something that you will see in a lot of projects. But yeah, you can basically, and we'll show again on the next slide what this looks like, but you can define kind of shortcuts for when I say start, I want you to run this command. And this is really useful for big projects with kind of complicated processes and stuff like that. Okay, so going back, dependencies, this describes what libraries are in your project, and this describes what scripts your project has access to. Questions about package.json? This is a very, very important file. Every single JavaScript project that you work with npm will have it. and you'll find all your packages
You
there.
mentioned that if if someone else wants to work on our project, they need something. Can you just go over that?
Yeah. So let's actually go to the next slide. I think this makes this a lot much clearer. What does it mean to install a dependency? So package.json just has a list of your dependencies, right? Where does the code live? npm install will go into your package.json file, look at all the dependencies, and download the code for each one of those, right? So npm install, when I run that command, right, it looks for a file called package.json. It goes into that list of dependencies. It expects it to be there, and it will go look up on an npm server. It's like, okay, where's the code for this, like for React, right? Where's the code for React DOM? Where's the code for React scripts, right? npm install does that work, right? And it's going to look them up. It's going to download the code, and it's going to put them in this folder called node modules. All right, so node modules is another folder you'll find in most of your React projects. You'll see it after today. You'll see it in your final project, right? And that's where the actual code that you downloaded for your dependencies lives, right? So again, package.json describes your project's dependencies. npm install looks them up and downloads them, and it puts them inside node modules. Questions on that flow? That's like the core of npm, and that's like the most often thing you'll be using. So I want to go back real quick to this command. npm install dependency name basically does two things. It automatically finds like the latest version of the dependency. It adds it to your package.json for you, so you don't have to constantly edit package.json. And it then runs npm install and downloads the code for it. So it kind of like a shorthand to do like those steps all at once, right? So it adds the dependency to your package.json, and then it kind of calls npm install and downloads like what it needs. Questions there? All right, so the last thing is that when you run npm install, two things are generated. Node modules is a folder. Again, if you open it up, you will see tons of other folders in there, and that's all the code for your packages. You can look at them. They're terrible. You'll probably never want to look at them. And the other file that's generated is called package-lock.json. And it looks something like, oh boy. It looks something like this. This is maybe like 100 lines out of like a very, very, very long file. Like this does not capture the entire file, but as you can see, it's not very pretty. It's very ugly, but it gets generated when you run npm install, and it kind of it describes something a little bit more than what dependencies are in your project. So in package.json, we specified what do we need to run like our code, right? But when we go and install React, React might say, hey, to be able to use this stuff in React, I actually depend on a lot more. I depend on, and then lists 100 more libraries. And those libraries might also depend on things, right? And so in order to figure out like npm's job when it runs npm install is not just to look up the dependencies. It looks at the dependencies, downloads them, and then downloads their dependencies, and downloads all like sub-dependencies necessary to make your project work. So even by just installing React, we have this huge file called package-lock that you will see that contains all the info. You will never need to worry about this. I hope you will never need to worry about this file. But it's important to know that it exists. And the more important thing is to know that these two files are generated. So that means that you can delete node modules and you can delete package-lock.json and run npm install again and get everything afresh. Sometimes that's actually the cause of some bugs, and that's the solution, is to just delete node modules and install all your dependencies again. Yeah. Questions on this slide? This is the core of npm, very important. You'll be working with this every day when you work with the JavaScript and especially React. I know it's not really fun, or this part's not the fun part, but it's really, really important to understand kind of how these work. Something that's kind of funny about this is that this process of going from here, to here, is that there is an algorithm, or one of the things that npm is kind of famous for, is that there's an algorithm to how to resolve what dependencies you need. And this entire algorithm, which like millions and millions of developers use and is used like every single day, like very, very often. Like you can only imagine how many people are running npm install like every minute. This algorithm was like written out and figured out in the back of a napkin in like maybe one night, and then now it's used like across like the entire world, which It kind of goes to show like a very common thing in JavaScript of like things get built way too quickly and then they're scaled up like way unexpectedly and then like we kind of have to deal with them, which is why a lot of things in JavaScript can be kind of ugly. But yeah. So npm, that's kind of its job, is to deal with dependencies. Finally, some last couple useful commands is npm run and then the name of a script. We'll run one of those scripts inside your package.json folder. It's pretty straightforward. Npm start, which is another command, this is the last command you'll use very, very often. You probably already used it in project 1. Npm start, like just calls that start script in your project. Like it's a shortcut for npm run start. It'll call this, and this is usually the command we expect to like launch the project. Yeah, cool. So kind of going back to a full overview, like why do we bother with like installing npm, right? This question of like, is npm like a backend concern or a frontend concern? The reason that Node is relevant in React projects is because when we write like JSX code, when we write JSX code, it often has to get like, there's a lot of like processing that needs to happen to every JavaScript file that we write in order to be like most efficient to be delivered back to the browser. Right? You guys might have heard of minification, which like it changes all your variable names and like removes all the spaces to make your file as small as possible. Like if we go into any like big website, you will see like all the code is extremely, Like for example, if we go to reactdecal.org and like inspect the element, and we look at the source. Oh, actually, I don't want to do that. I want to look at the source code. Like this code. Like all this code is in a single line. It's extremely small and it doesn't make any sense, right? How does our code, the JavaScript that we write, get into this format? There's a lot of processing steps that happen, and we use like all of those are written like our Node libraries, our npm packages as well, and that's kind of why like this is all very relevant. Is that when we work with JavaScript libraries or when we work with React, we usually want to do a lot of these processing steps, which Ethan will get into talking about. And npm has this great ecosystem of build tools, more importantly. All these front-end libraries we can get with script tags. The thing that we can't get is like the build tools that like help turn our JavaScript that we like to write into great JavaScript, or like very, very small JavaScript that we can pack it into one single file, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And finally, very easy package management. This is much easier than looking up a bunch of script tags. I can look up like an npm package, like let's say I want to add like a pop-up notification, right? I can look up like how do I get a modal in React, find this library, and I'll look at the instructions, and the installation just says npm install react-modal, and that's all I need to bring it into my project and be able to start using it. And then in the code, I would just be import react modal. Yeah. Questions? Again, this is kind of weird, not very fun, but not very fun to like understand how npm works because it's basically like a screwdriver in like building like really cool things, but it is very fundamental in like getting things to work in JavaScript. All right, cool. If there's no questions, then Ethan, I think, will take over to talk about a little bit more about these processing steps, and then we'll talk about the fun of like a demo where we actually like use all this stuff.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about JavaScript. We've been talking about this the entire course, but let's talk a little bit more about it. So first, we've kind of explained npm at this high level, what it is, how you interact with it, which is in your terminal, like npm install, whatever. Let's talk generally about how JS is run. Okay. So if we want to import someone else's JavaScript code into our project, what do we do? Who here has like written some level of HTML and CSS before this course? Just like show of hands. Okay, so like maybe like half of you. You might like have seen this pattern before where you're trying to bring in maybe Bootstrap, or you're trying to bring in jQuery maybe, and you see all these libraries online, and you're like, well, I want to use that. That looks cool. This is a nice animation. This is a nice design library, and they tell you, well, what you need to do is you need to paste in the script tag. Right? And we've talked about script tags like very briefly in this course. It's like this HTML element that loads in some JavaScript. But what you can do is you can point to someone else's JavaScript, right? So that's what you can do with a script tag. So that is like the one way, and maybe probably like basically the only way that you can run JavaScript inside of the browser. So in general, if you want to run someone else's JavaScript inside the browser, it's in a script tag. At the end of the day, it's script tags all the way down. Okay? The other way you can import JS, and this is from a developer standpoint, right? So these following ones about Bower and NPM, your user doesn't see that at all, right? So like anyone visiting your website is not going to know that you use NPM. Okay, like they're not going to actually see your node modules folder. They have no idea what package.json is, and that's fine, right? It's just going to end up in a script tag anyway. I'll explain that. That's a little vague. So the second way is you can use a tool called Bower, and maybe some of you have heard of Bower before. Bower is another kind of package manager, and what it does is it brings it into a single folder that's served, and you basically write script tags to point to a folder called Bower components. Okay, so that's another way to do it. Bower is just like a convenient way of placing script tags into your page. That's what it is. Okay, and then this is what we've kind of been talking about is NPM, right? So NPM, what it does is something even like less, it does even less for you than Bower does, okay? NPM, all it does is it figures out what dependency you need, what its dependencies are, and so on recursively, and it just drops it into this folder called node modules. And that doesn't do anything by default. That folder actually means nothing by default. Your JavaScript, your page, has to bring that and import it in some form to make sure that that JavaScript runs in the browser. And I'll explain that. It's also big. But that is why we need a build step at the end, right? Because the node modules folder really means nothing, to a user or to a page, we need this thing called a build step, and I'll explain that. So what does a script tag look like? So for example, one sec. So let's say you really, really need jQuery. Hopefully you don't, because you're writing stuff that uses document.query selector, stuff like that in general. But maybe you're using some fancy calendar script and you need to put in a script tag. Fine. Import jQuery. You can just put a script element, point the source attribute to some JavaScript, and it's in your page. It loads in the browser. So that's great. Bower, don't. Just don't use Bower. Okay. NPM and build step. So let's explain this. So this is like kind of what you've seen before, right? NPM install jQuery, right? This is an example of fetching a package from the NPM registry. In this case, it's jQuery, and we're downloading it into the node modules file, right? And so the way that you would import this inside of your project.js is with something like this. And you might have seen this statement before, right? We've seen this when we're trying to import components into other components, right? It had like import app from /app.jsx. You've seen that before, right? This is the same thing, except you're just using the name of something you fetched from NPM. That same package name is going to be used in the resolution of this module, okay? So we're going to talk about what this import statement means and why this actually works. Question?
So you mean that after NPM start and after coding all our website at the end, we need a build step?
Yep. Let's talk about the build step. So the build step, this is where imports actually mean something, okay? So we've been using import in this class, and we've kind of like put a layer of abstraction over it with Code Sandbox, right? So imports automatically work. They don't automatically work by default, okay? So if you create a JS file inside of your computer, throw that into another HTML file and don't do any special treatment to it, import will actually it'll error unless you do some special configuration to it, okay? So what we do in the build step is we convert import statements to this that random garbled JavaScript that Avant showed you, right? It looks like this. It's all this minified JavaScript. So again, it's all script tags all the way down, and it just gets stuck in a script so that the browser actually runs it, okay? So what does the build step do? It walks through your JavaScript project, okay? So it goes through app.jsx, tweetrow.jsx, tweetcar.jsx. It grabs those files, looks for the imports, and sticks them in the script head like that, okay? So that's it. It's really not that magical, but you have to set up these tools in advance so that it will do this for you. You can't just create a JavaScript file and expect everything to work. This is actually the headache for so many JavaScript developers. People will complain about the build step all the time, but fortunately, in 2019, there are a lot of really nice tools that solve this problem for you. We're going to show you one of those today. Questions about the build step?
How does the file structure afterwards look like?
Yeah, let's look at it. What does the file structure look like? So we're going to be using this project today. So the question is after the build step happens, what does that even look like? So I'm gonna show that. This is like any other Code Sandbox that we've built in this class. Okay, if I ls here, it's inside of source, right? We've got index.js, styles.css. This is just like a code sandbox, right? I literally downloaded this from code sandbox like 25 minutes ago. So we have this, and I'm going to run npm run build, which is a script that we defined in package.json. I'm going to run this, and it's going to tell us that I haven't installed anything, so I'm going to run npm install. Okay, and this little thing shows up. Yeah, it's super slow. I don't know why. Okay. Yeah, your node modules folder may end up being like many megabytes large, which is like very weird. Like what's in there? I don't know. This will go. It's doing a lot. This creates like hundreds of thousands of files in the background. It's kind of crazy. Actually, like if you look into node modules, you'll probably just like want to back out immediately. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of insane. We can even look at it while it's going. This is the folder. You see this? Like this is, and like all of these have node modules folders inside of them, right? So like this has node modules. I don't even want to. I can't even look. I can't even see it. It's not. I don't even know what's going on here. Yeah, it's doing its thing. Okay. And then what do we? npm run build. Okay. So this is the build step. We're doing the build step right now. React scripts is a tool that allows you to automate that build step, so I don't have to worry about any of that. And it says creating an optimized production build. Okay. So that means it's sticking everything into a script tag. Okay. So that's what we're doing. All right. Let's check it out.
Where does the React scripts come from?
The internet. It's also an npm package. Okay, so it showed up inside this build folder. Let's check out what it generated. Well, it generated us an HTML file, which is nice. And here is actually where all that script tag stuff shows up, okay? So do you see this script? I don't know if you can actually see this. Let me like prettify this. Okay. Okay. Yeah, you see this, oh my God. Okay, this. See this script source equals main, and then some hash chunk.js. This is right here inside of the JavaScript folder. You can check out the main chunk, and I can prettify this as well. And this is the built JavaScript. Okay, it's like very, very large. Okay, so this is what the build step looks like. It just sticks everything into a script tag. What it does. Okay, cool. Let's talk about setting up a React project. So it turns out like this is really hard. It's not something that you want to attempt on your own. And that's for reasons, like I said, is you can't just create a JavaScript file and expect that build step to happen for you. You have to configure this. So that's why there are tools like Create React App, which is like a really like, it's a very direct name. That's actually just what it does. It sets up like some skeleton code for you, just like we've been using for this whole class. All of those code sandboxes started from Create React App. And it creates all those scripts for you so that you can run things like npm run build, right? It sets up that build step. So if you ever need an optimized production build, if you ever need all that stuff stuck into one script tag, you can do that. In addition, it sets up a development server for you, right? So if you run npm start, it actually allows you to edit your JavaScript, save it, and it'll instantly refresh in the browser. No reloading necessary, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. I've already created a React app here. I mean, I can show you what that looks like otherwise. If I just cd into my temp folder here, and I say npx, so npx, I'm not going to go into too much detail about what it does right now, but if you ever need to run a command line JavaScript dependency, like create React app, just replace the M with an X. It means like you're trying to run it inside of this, inside of a terminal, but without downloading the actual dependency, okay? So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm running create React app, but create React app is not being saved anywhere, because create React app is kind of a meta tool. It's a tool to create a JavaScript project. So I'm not trying to install create React app, I'm just trying to run it. Okay, so I'm running create React app, I'm creating a project called test project, and it's going to temporarily download create React app just so that it can run it. And it says, oh, we created one, and it's there, and it's going to download all the dependencies again. And I'm not going to wait for it, but it's going to end up with something like this, like React DeCal Spotify API demo. Same thing, okay? So that's how we set up a React project, is create React app. So now let's actually jump into what this looks like. I'm going to go into this demo, and I'm going to kind of explain like what importing a dependency looks like and what interacting with it looks like, okay? So I've already installed my dependencies here, but let's kind of like poke around a bit and see what's going on. Okay. Package.json. These are the ones you've seen before. Can people see this? React, React DOM, React scripts. Those are just like some base dependencies that got installed for me. And then I've installed this thing called Spotify-web-api-js, okay? So I found this online. Probably a lot of you will end up using this because it is like a nice wrapper around Spotify's libraries. And I'm going to show you how I can just start using that inside of my React project, okay? So for like 2 takeaways. One is that you can start your React project with your project team by running npx create React app, right? That is one thing you can do to get things started like this without Code Sandbox, yeah? And then the second takeaway is like if I go into this project file now, or this project folder, and run npm start, it's going to start this development server for me that allows me to start editing just like Code Sandbox. It's very, very similar. If I pull, it says starting the development server. Let's just go here. Oh. Okay, so it's right here. And it says can't read property authenticated null. So this is probably like an area that you've seen before, right? Like this is like a React app running live. Okay, so I can fix this error by going into here and uncommenting some stuff that I've already written, and it'll automatically update on the page. Okay, so let's do an example of that. Like what I'll do here is inside of my render function, ignore all this stuff. We'll just return hello. Can I do this? I don't know. There we go. See? So I didn't refresh the browser tab at all. I just saved it in my text editor, and it rendered hello. Cool? So that's how you start a React project. It's like it's just like Code Sandbox, but you're just running one extra command to get things started. Okay? Sound good? All right, let's talk about Spotify's API. So in Spotify's API, you would start by doing something like, let me bring up the React DeCal. There we go. So I would do something like npm install Spotify web API JS. Is that what it was? Is that what it was? I don't actually remember. Web API JS, yeah. So this is how I would initially pull it into my project, right? I would hit enter, and after this is finished, it's available to my project because it's downloaded it into Node modules. And after it does that, I can go into my index.js file. This is the entry point of my application. This is where everything gets started. I can write this import statement at the top like this. Import Spotify from Spotify Web API JS. It's just like that file that, it's as if the file actually existed in my project, but it's actually inside of Node modules, okay? And the difference is that there's no // in front of it, right? So if I put this // in front of it, what do you think it's looking for? Like, what's the difference here? Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna look around for it and it can't find it, and the reason why is because it's looking for it locally, right? It's looking for, if I go into my project directory here, it's looking inside of source/Spotify Web API JS, right? If I save this, I wonder if it'll actually tell me this. Yeah, it's like I can't resolve this. I don't know where this is. I don't know where this lives, okay? So I just remove that, and all of a sudden now it can resolve from Node modules, right? So it's looking inside of Node modules, saying, okay, now I have that dependency and I can load it up into this page, okay? So I don't have a ton of time left. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna speed through this. I'm not gonna type anything. I'm just gonna uncomment things and then talk about what's going on along the way, okay? This source code will be available to you after class. So if you're looking for some inspiration and getting started with the Spotify Web API, you can refer to the source code. But just stop me at any time, because this is just, at this point, I've imported the dependency into my project, which was created with Create React App. And at this point, I'm just interacting with a very specific library. So everything has kind of been covered. Yeah. Yeah, the question is, how do I know this is named Spotify? This name actually doesn't matter. So I could call this like Spotify, and it's gonna work. I just need to refer to it in the same way, okay? So this is kind of a trickier thing is what specific imports and exports means. You will see this online. You'll see import, and then in braces debounce from Lodash. You might see something like this. This name actually does matter. Okay, so if it's inside of braces, follow the procedure online for importing that specific piece of the package. But if you're importing the entire thing, which is what we call the default named export, you can name it whatever you want. It's going to take the default thing that comes out of that package and stick it in your script tag. Whoa, crazy. Yeah, it's very fun. Yeah, this is how you, this is very exciting because this is 900,000 dependencies, right? That are available to you, right? Spotify. Okay, so let's uncomment this. Any other questions? Module resolution, NPM, JavaScript. It's kind of weird. Okay, just stop me. Just stop me at any time. So what this project is for, this demo, what it's supposed to do is basically just render a search bar, and then I'm going to type in the name of a song. I'm going to click one of those songs, and it's going to start playing on my computer. So that's the purpose of this demo, okay? All of those things are possible, and actually more things are possible through this Spotify Web API JS. So I highly, highly encourage you to check out this package. It wraps around all of Spotify's functionality, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncomment this. This is some state setup, like we've seen before, and I'm binding a function that I'm going to use later. Let's poke around at my render function here. I'm going to stop returning hello. This is a statement that I'm going to use to either render a link to log in with Spotify or to render the rest of the app. So you are probably going to have to do this too. The reason why is because the flow for authenticating with Spotify is something like my app is going to link you out to Spotify. Spotify is going to ask for your credentials on spotify.com. And spotify.com is going to redirect me back to my app and provide me a little information called an access token to actually fetch Spotify's information for my user account, right? Because this is all like sensitive information. Like we don't want anyone to be able to just access the names of my devices and start playing, right? That'd be kind of weird. So that's what that's for, okay? So I have like this, I have this conditional rendering set up so that I either have a login with Spotify link or the rest of the app, okay? Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this.state.authenticated variable up. I default authenticated to false. So what happens by default is I just see this link called login with Spotify, right? I can click it, and what it does is it actually, I should go in incognito so I'm not automatically logged in. But then I would actually have to put in my details. How to fix? What I'll do is I'll change the link. How about that? We'll change the link real quick. We'll just X this. I think this will work. Okay. Well, okay, so the first time that you do this, like Spotify will actually load. In this case, it's redirecting too fast. And since I've already logged in, it's bypassing it. But you can see like what's changing about this URL is it's changing from localhost 3000 to localhost 3000 with an access token, right? And all this information after is actually like identified with my account, and it allows me to access my account's information, okay? And that's what we're going to do inside of componented mount, right? So in componented mount, we're going to say, okay, if you have that information, we're going to remove that weird hash thing in front of it, right? So it's this bit right here, talking about this part. We need to remove this character. Basically, we need everything after access token equals, and then we need that string. So I'm going to parse it out. You can look into these details later to see exactly what's going on. I'm going to parse it out with a built-in called URL search params. I'm going to create a variable on this component called Spotify client, with which I use the Spotify dependency that I've imported. And then I'm going to set up the access token with the one that's available to me in the URL. And let's just show you what that does. So what happens is, now I have a dropdown, but I'll explain why I have a dropdown in a bit. Let's take a look at what happened in state. So I'm going to go into React. I'm going to check out app. And what happened is, like initially, you can see authenticated is false, and I have no, authenticated is false, right? Nothing is there. After I log in with Spotify, the component's going to mount. And then it's going to update with authenticated true, and even my current device and devices, right? So I have my device list loaded up because that's what I'm doing here. I'm saying await this.spotify client, get my devices. So it's loading all the devices into state, okay? That's what's going on. And then now what I'm going to do is I think we're pretty much ready to go. All I have to do is uncomment this event handler, which is for this form right here. This is a form right here that I'm using to tap into the search API. And what it does is it awaits this.spotify client.search tracks, right? So I'm going to search Spotify's API for some tracks that match this name, and then I'm going to put it into state as well. Okay, so it says this.setState songs, right? I'm doing some additional parsing here, which you're going to have to do as well, but this is the important part, right? I'm putting the response of this Spotify client's information into state. And once I have state in, what happens is I can go in here and type in like right? And now that information is getting loaded up into here, right? See this? Okay. I also have a click handler set up for each of these songs, and it actually starts the playback with that song's ID. So I can show you, if I click this, is anything happening? Oh, nothing's happening. Oh, that's awkward. Oh. So I have my devices here. Let me just try this one more time. If it doesn't work, that's okay. Oh yeah, it's starting. It's just my volume's down. Okay. Right? So in each of these cases, what's happening is when I click any of these things, we're actually awaiting this.spotify client And we're saying this.spotify client.play on my current device with the track that I've selected. So that's what's happening here. So that's like a lightweight Spotify client. Because I'm doing two things. I'm searching tracks, or I'm doing three things, sorry. I'm searching tracks, I'm identifying my devices, and then I'm linking those two together to play a song to a specific device, okay? All this code will be available to you. It's actually, it might look overwhelming, but it's actually like less than 150 lines, and it's like pretty like straightforward if you like break it down, okay? Any questions about this? Yeah.
Can you retell what you do? You said three things. You do?
Oh yeah. So I did three things. I used the Spotify dependency for three things. I used the Spotify Web API JS for three things. I searched Spotify's tracks. I got my current devices, which include my computer. And then I put those two pieces of information together to send a specific track to this device. And that's why it started playing. Okay?
Ah,
Yeah.
so the web page does not play.
The web page doesn't play. Yeah.
You have the Spotify app open and running in the background.
Yes.
This one plays.
Yes. My Spotify app is running right now.
There is another API to make the website play. We'll leave you guys to figure that out.
Yeah, just only that was not clear to me. I thought you would
Oh, yeah.
stream this song into the website, kind of, but you're only putting one command and it's only one liner, kind of,
Right.
and this playback is handled in a very different place.
Yeah, no. Dot play is sending it to my device.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Well,
Oh, yeah. Question?
sorry, quickly, is
Yeah.
there any issue with the access token being in the URL, like from a security standpoint, or is there a better way to do that?
So access tokens being part of the URL, that's pretty common because tokens expire. Like this, if I refresh this page in an hour, it's not gonna work. So like I have to refresh for access tokens like every hour, which is okay for projects for this class. If you want to make it so that that access token never expires, then you have to build a server around that. Yeah, like your server would then store two pieces of information, an access token and a refresh token. And the refresh token is the piece of information that's extremely sensitive. Access tokens are like, those can expire, and those can like, you can invalidate those pretty quickly. Yeah. There are actually better ways to retrieve an access token that are not part of the URL. Which is a good point. So there are ways of passing it not to the URL, but it's pretty common. It's pretty good. Okay. Okay, thank you for coming.
Fill out attendance. The link is open. You can fill it out as you go, wherever. But yeah, thanks for coming, guys. See you next week.
Yeah, I was just curious
Oh,
because I built this little like pocket. I've used something like Pocket, so I built this little thing that sends me an email every morning with like 3 reading articles from my Pocket.
Oh, yeah.
I found that I don't read my reading list, so I don't have a notification surrounding it. And even then, I don't necessarily. But anyway, I was curious how I was looking into like how to use OAuth to basically like make it a product that anyone could use, where like you'd have to go to a website and then like sign in with Pocket, and then like I'd use their access token, which theirs don't I think expire. Or maybe they do, I don't know. But
It might depend. It might be on an API dependent basis. Usually,
because I
access-
just like
yeah.
got an access token from them, and then
Oh, and that worked forever.
and I haven't had to do anything. Like I just use this access token as kind of like an API key, I guess. It's
Okay.
more like an API key than an access token. I
Gotcha.
guess.
Okay.
But there's a way to do it like through a process of like communicating, going like the redirect, and then it redirects back and everything. So
Yes.
I was just curious. I'm trying to figure out.
Sure.
At some point, that's one of the side projects I want to finish. Is like letting anyone with a Pocket account get that email. Although I need to pay sign probably. So.
Yeah. In that case, it sounds like you do want to store a refresh token on everyone, because it sounds like the OAuth token that you're getting right now, that you're using, is like a personal token that like,
Yeah.
again, doesn't
Yeah,
expire.
I'm not sure. I'd have to look into it.
Yeah.
anyways.
I would look into one thing that might be like useful to understand. Like, there's probably a lot of good OAuth guides, but Spotify's guides actually like have. Spotify has 3 different ways to authenticate with them, and they have really nice like diagrams on how each of them work. And like even though theirs are for Spotify, the same like process happens for each of them. I'd recommend checking those out. Like those would be
Yeah, I was dealing with
fair.
like basic OAuth and like what's the other one like web.
OAuth is terrible.
There's another one too that's really old. Anyway, I was dealing with those over the summer at the internship, and it was just like a mess to like understand how all these like refresh and
Yeah.
and access
We
tokens
threw
work.
around last semester whether we would like talk about OAuth and Rails
yeah.
DeCal, but it was just too much.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool though.
Yeah. I don't know if I don't know how many. What we have one more lecture.
We have 3 more classes. We might like mix lecture and lab style based on
Yeah.
whatever's most interesting. For example, like this kind of stuff, it's more fun to do it. rather than like see it happen. So we might have like a lab where we introduce a concept for the first 20 minutes, and then last 30 minutes you play with it.
Anyway, I'd be curious. I put it in a form at some point to learn more about how to integrate. I know some people use Ruby on Rails and then React for front end, and I'd be curious like how that works.
Yes. That interaction is a little tricky, usually.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
At the most basic level, you could think of it as like basically Ruby on Rails. Actually, it's hard no matter what you're doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway,
There's if you do want to look into it though, because we might not cover it. There's a gem I think called React Rails, and basically what it does is your view file, like how like in Ruby in the ERB files you had like form for like link to, it gives you a helper called React component, and that React component you basically just specify a single component to pass back as the root of your page. As like you could think of it as like a React DOM.render, and then like it'll look into your JavaScript files, package everything up like for that one component, and send